Hello, greetings, truth seekers. This is a response to Geoasher023. I'm responding to this because recently Pagan the Christian did a response to his video. A Jew disproves Christianity in 5 minutes. And he had also done some other videos that I'd been wanting to get around to, and I just never thought I'd do. So I just decided that now would be a good time to go ahead and throw my 2 cents into the mix. I must say that Pagan really did a good job of, covering a lot of information. But topics like these, you can just go on and on and on and just talk about them. So I thought I would just elaborate on some of the other points. Well, some of the things that we could go into a little bit more. One of the things, there's this assumption that the Messiah must come from the line of Solomon. There's a scripture in 2 Samuel that's quoted. Pagan does a good job of showing how the Messiah could descend from Nathan as well. But there's another assumption that we're dealing with an earthly Messiah here, a king who is descended from the seed of man. It's clear that Jesus was not pursuing an earthly throne. He states to Pilate when he's captured that my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then you would not be handling me so, because the one who has given you power basically is allowing you to capture me. There's so many words of what Jesus said. And I think, it's good that we dwell on this for a little bit longer, and that is that we talk about the throne of Solomon. So often, we see the term that Jesus was the son of David. Was he the son of Solomon? No, Jesus was the son of David. Was Jesus the son of David, or was he an ancestor of David? See, that's the terminology there. When we say son of, we're referring to his lineage being tied to David. But what we see is that when we talk about the Messianic throne, it's always the throne of David. It's never the throne of Solomon. But I'm making a general comments here. If you want to get into the actual texts of 2 Samuel and discuss that the Messiah had to come from the line of Solomon, go to another video on that, because that's a little. I want to get into the overarching themes here. I don't want to get into the trees of the forest. I want to look at the forest. And so what I'm talking about here is that ultimately the throne is the Lord's throne. It's Israel was warned basically that they should not take a king. Okay, they were warned that a king was going to put taxes on them. They're going to put heavy burdens on them. So ultimately. They were told, who is the king of Israel? The Lord is the king of Israel. God is the king, is Israel's king, So, God allowed it, He allowed it, He didn't. It's like so much of our own lives where, the Lord allows us to go down a certain path, and He blesses us, despite our choices, So despite the choice that Israel had made, that, they really shouldn't have taken a king. We see God's purposes, we see His will continue to be fulfilled in them because He has chosen them as His people. So I'm getting into this messianic shadow idea, where the reality of the Lord, the reality of the Spirit of the Messiah, continues to ping itself throughout history, in leaders, in messianic leaders, who are earthly leaders, who are descended from the seed of man. But what we see is this concept of the final Messiah, the one who would be the last Messiah to come and reign in the world to come, to set the captives free, to bring in peace, to wipe away all of our tears, to basically bring heaven on earth. The kingdom of God is on earth. Well, moving on. Let me just say, the connection to the Messiah, to David, is emphasized that it had to be a physical connection. And so that was important that Matthew and Luke created a genealogy that showed that Joseph was traced back to David, as well as Mary. Now, I'll get into the arguments about Mary having a genealogy in Luke, but the reality is that in all likelihood that Luke's genealogy is a genealogy of Mary. So we need to be clear when we're speaking about messianic expectations. There are those expectations which are earthly expectations of a leader, who's going to come in and save the people. Like Moses was a Messiah. Joseph, was a Messiah who saved his family from the famine, out of Egypt. And then there are those expectations of a Messiah which are heavenly. And these are of a supernatural figure who comes on the scene and basically brings healing to the world. This is the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, that we all have a part in the healing of the world, and that it is a gradual process. And Pagan brought this up about prophecy being, gradually fulfilled. And I would even add that prophecy is fulfilled again and again and again and again. It's like a rock that you skip down a pond and it continues to jump down the pond. That is what prophecy is like. The Lord speaks His word and it continues to manifest itself throughout history. So the physical king, the physical Messiah, was definitely someone descended from David, of the seed of man. But the heavenly Messiah, who is Lord, is king over all of the earth. Okay, let's just make that clear, okay? Two different things, okay? Basically, tribal lineage does not always have to travel through the father. When we talk about inheritance, there were some daughters in the Old Testament scriptures that were able to receive the inheritance because all of the men in their family had died, and so they were able to receive the land inheritance of their family, so that they could continue to perpetuate their name. One of the facts, one of the things today that is quite obvious is that if you are Jewish and you wish to make an aliyah to the state of Israel, you wish to move there, you wish to become a resident of the state of Israel, you have to prove that you're Jewish by showing that your mother is Jewish. That, I believe, is one of the requirements still. And so the mother's part in your assessment of whether you're Jewish or not, is very significant. I just want to point that out. We all know that Jesus' mother was a Jew. But just a little side note, that's all. Lineage or inheritance, or a name can be passed through the woman. But this is all kind of irregardless of the main argument, which is that the lineage of Jesus was not passed through a man, but actually the lineage of Jesus was passed through a man, and that is that his lineage was passed through Heli, or Heli, however you want to pronounce his name, and then unto Mary, and then unto Jesus. So the argument is that Heli is the grandfather of Jesus, that Heli is the father of Mary, and so for those that would say, oh, well, see, Jesus is not descended from a man or a male. Actually, he had a grandfather who was male. His name was Heli. So you just need to kind of get away from that argument that regardless of this whole thing about women not being able to have the lineage, what we see here is that the lineage was passed from man to man to man until we get to Mary. Okay, so within Mary's womb, within her body, she is she holds the lineage of David. Okay, so the argument based on the assumption that the final Messiah must be born of a seed of a man, but the spirit of the Messiah is one who is going to be born of a young maiden. In Isaiah 7:14, and it will be a sign that he is born of the young maiden. Okay, it's going to be a sign that he is born of this young maiden. And what exactly is that sign? What is the sign? Well, it's probably not that he's born of a young maiden, because that's a pretty common occurrence. Women are having babies everywhere. They're having babies all the time. Okay, but what is going to be a sign is that the Lord's power is going to be displayed. The Lord's power to save. Okay, and that is why this child's very nature will be that of Emmanuel, which is God with us. And that is why the angel states that the name that Mary was to give her child would be Jesus, or in the Greek, Jesus, or rather in the Hebrew, Yeshua, which means Lord is salvation. Okay? I say Lord, I'm referring to the sacred name of the Lord. Okay? So, we're getting into those arguments about Alma, the Hebrew word Alma, not meaning virgin. Okay, kind of besides the point. There's two words in Hebrew that are used, Alma and Betula. Geoasher says Betula means virgin, but actually neither one of those words explicitly means virgin. In fact, Hebrew, from what I've studied, doesn't have a specific word for virgin. But you have to understand the word in the context of the passage. And so, rest assured that the Hebrew word Alma can mean virgin. Okay, Rashi, who was one of the most famous Jewish commentators, actually translated the word Alma, or Almaot. In this case, it was a plural word for virgins, Almaot, in his commentary on the Song of Songs in chapter 1, verse 3. And if you don't believe me, you can look that up. Basically, yeah, you can see that in both cases, Alma or Betula can mean young maiden or virgin. But from what I've studied, it seems to be that Alma leans a little bit closer to the meaning of virgin than Betula. Now that's just what I've studied, so but keep in mind that word Alma doesn't appear in the scriptures very much, like not that many times at all. So basically, I just wanted to point that out because a lot of people tend to fall into that argument, that Betula means virgin and Alma means young maiden, and when the reality is, there is really no distinct, there's no distinction there unless you're looking at it in context. So, basically, he got into a little bit about the virgin birth being called a pagan concept, and I like Pagan the Christian's notion that he talks about, and well, maybe I'm jumping a little bit ahead of myself here. Let me just talk a little bit about other notes concerning the two genealogies of Jesus. Now, it seems clear that both Matthew and Luke make a point to show that Joseph was not the father of Jesus. Matthew states Joseph, who was the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus. So up to Joseph, each generation begets the next, and in the usual manner, and then until finally we get to Joseph's father, who begets Joseph. But then when we get to Joseph, Joseph is not said to beget Jesus. Mary is said to be the one of whom Jesus is born. Okay? Now you may think I'm like picking at straws here right now, or nitpicking, but stay with me. When we talk about Luke, we see the same point made. So Luke states that Jesus, whom was supposedly the son of Joseph, and so again we see that Joseph did not beget Jesus. So the passage in Luke is misunderstood. If you look at each Greek word in a lexicon, you can see how one could translate the text as stating that Jesus was the son of Heli. Okay, but was thought to have been the son of Joseph. Okay, and who was Heli? He was Mary's father. And so Jesus was the son of Heli through Mary. Since the tradition of stating the lineage of the male prevailed, Heli was the father, or rather grandfather, of Jesus. We can easily assume that Luke had a knowledge of Matthew's gospel, and that he knew that the father of Joseph was Jacob. Okay? So therefore Luke states it was supposedly thought that Jesus was the son of Joseph. But not so. He was the son of Heli. That's my paraphrase version. Okay. You can look up the Greek yourself, and you can see how it's a little problematic. But in context, it makes sense that in this manner. And we can easily assume that the other point that seems to support the context of this passage in Luke chapter 3, verse 23, is that prior to this we see a great drama played out with Elizabeth and Mary, and Mary at this point speaks her famous prayer, the Magnificat. And in fact, Luke gives more details about Mary than any other gospel. And so it just is easy to see why Luke would give the lineage of Mary at this point in the account. Another point in regard to Matthew, he seems to be aware of this curse of Jeconiah. And this is why he makes the points about Mary being the one whom Jesus was born, whom he was born of, and also going further by accounting of the virgin birth. So basically a more straightforward and the most common explanation is that Luke's genealogy is of Mary. And in regard to the name Heli, it has been suggested that Heli is short for Helikim, which in the Septuagint of the Old Testament is the alternative name of King Jehoiakim, and therefore we get the tradition that Mary's father's name was Joachim or Joachim, and we could see this in the proto-evangelism of James, that Mary was the daughter of Anne and Joachim. So that tends to line up with that reasoning. That's speculation, but it tends to line up. So why are there these two genealogies? Why was there a genealogy for Joseph, since Yeshua, Jesus, is not the real son of Joseph? Website I went to gave this explanation. Matthew's gospel gives us a royal line, whereas Luke's gospel gives us the real line. To understand the need for the two genealogies, we need to understand the kingship in the Hebrew scriptures. These were developed after the division of the kingdom after the death of Solomon. One was applicable to the southern kingdom of Judah, with the capital in Jerusalem, while the other was applicable to the northern kingdom with its capital in Samaria. This is an interesting speculation. I'm not saying it's true, but there are some points to be made about this. And one of them being that the Gospel of Luke is the only Gospel that has the parable of the Good Samaritan in it, and the story of the 10 lepers being cured and cleansed, but only the Samaritan leper returning to Jesus to thank him. We also see the parable of the lost sheep and of that of the prodigal son that are only found in the book of Luke. Now, all this to just say a lot of stuff regarding Samaritans, and it would also seem that it is in reference to the 10 lost tribes of the northern kingdom. Basically, the 10 lepers being representation of the 10 lost tribes, and them being cleansed, basically, allegorically, of their idolatry, of their sins. The one coming back to Jesus, which was a Samaritan to thank him, is further a reinforcement of the fact that that these 10 lepers are in regard to the northern kingdom, as Samaria is north of Jerusalem. Again, the parable of the Good Samaritan. We see here this emphasis on the northern kingdom in the book of Luke. And the lost sheep, most definitely a reference to the lost 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, and Jesus referring to those sheep that are lost, that he wants to bring back into the fold. He wants to bring the northern and the southern kingdom back together, but more than that, the world. And of course the prodigal son can apply to this concept as well. So it is interesting. It is interesting that Matthew gives an account of the lineage that is of the southern kingdom. But we can't really say that about Luke, because we can't trace those individuals, so we can't really know for sure if it's coming from the northern kingdom. And then it really goes back to Nathan again, who's in the southern kingdom. So it's interesting, but there are some interesting parallels because of the dichotomy of we have Elizabeth and Mary, and it seems like they're coming together and bringing the two together, the north and the south. We also see the prophet Simeon in the first section of Luke stating that Messiah would be a light to the Gentiles. Okay, the Gentiles, which is basically Samaritans and everybody else. But we also see Anna, a prophetess from the tribe of Asher, one of the lost tribes of Israel, in Luke 2:36, which states, there was a prophet, Anna, the daughter of Penuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was very old, and she had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then was a widow until she was 84. She never left the temple, but worshipped night and day, fasting and praying. coming up to them at that very moment, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. So we see Anna the prophetess, who is of the tribe of Asher, which was one of the lost tribes of the northern kingdom. But here we see she knows what her lineage is from, and so again this reinforced idea of the north and the south. You know, Luke has more references to the north than I believe Matthew does in the first section there. At least I know in the first section, because we see John the Baptist, who quotes Isaiah 40, verse 3 through 5 at the end, and all people will see God's salvation. He's referencing all people. He's saying we're coming into the final culmination of God's healing, of Tikkun Olam. This is what he is saying. You know, and again, there's this reference to the Gentiles. So, Pagan the Christian brings up a point about the Essenes' belief in two messiahs. I am not familiar with that reference, but I'm going to trust him on that. I know about the two messiah theory. I mean, if you read the book, The Messianic Text by Raphael Patai, great book. Suggest everybody get it. It does bring up this Messiah theory about, you have two Messiahs that are portrayed in the Scriptures. You have a portrayal of the suffering servant, and then you have the kingly Messiah who sits on a throne. And so the rabbis over time didn't know how to handle the two varying concepts, and so they began to talk about two messiahs. One who would come as a suffering Messiah, and then one who would come as a kingly Messiah. The suffering Messiah was Messiah ben Joseph. Messiah, son of Joseph. And Joseph who? Joseph of Jacob, of Israel. The Joseph who was sold into slavery, into Egypt, who suffered in Egypt and just went through all kinds of turmoil. You know, his life is a portrayal of the Messiah. It is a shadow. And again, remember I talk about prophecy being this gradual fulfillment, this continuing manifestation throughout history that the Lord, the Spirit of the Messiah continues to communicate to us. And that is that Messiah ben Joseph is a portrayal of the suffering Messiah. And then we have Messiah ben David, Messiah, son of David, who is the glorious king who reigns over a united monarchy. Then, we have this idea that if Jerusalem were righteous, Messiah will come as a kingly Messiah. But if they were not so, then he would come humble and riding on a donkey. So we see a variation of ideas in the rabbinic tradition within the sages, the older sages. So traditionally we see Luke, the writer of Luke as a Gentile, and maybe he was a Samaritan Gentile. Maybe? Yeah, I don't know, maybe. So, moving on from these genealogical arguments, we get into the next topic, which is regarding the sacrifice of Jesus, and he says that you don't need a sacrifice to be forgiven, and you don't need blood to be forgiven. And I think what there's a misunderstanding amongst many, in regard to what Christianity believes. And even Christians themselves don't really understand. They do understand it, in the bigger picture. But what we need to communicate really is that we agree with everything the Jewish believer would believe in regard to forgiveness. We know that God will forgive us just simply if we just ask Him to forgive us. That He will forgive us. That it's not just about the shedding of blood. That within the book of Hebrews it says, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. This text is perhaps taken a little too strictly in regard to the translation. But what it really needs to be read in context, and we need to understand that when we talk about atonement, we're talking about tikkun olam. We're talking about the final consummation of all things being perfected in Messiah, through Messiah. And so, without the suffering of the Messiah, the healing of the world would not take place. And this is why within the rabbinic tradition, the Messiah, waits in heaven, and he lays his head on the lap of Elijah, and he suffers, and Elijah strokes his head, and he says, soon, very soon, basically in so many words. But the Messiah's suffering is connected with Israel. The Messiah suffers because Israel suffers. The very fact that Israel suffers is a portrayal of the Messianic suffering, the suffering of the Spirit of Messiah. The Spirit who is the same Spirit who hovered over the waters in the beginning. That is the Spirit of King Messiah. So if you read in the book of 1 John, and the first chapter there, it just says, if anyone, has sinned, let him go to God, ask, and God will freely forgive him. It says it right there in our Christian scripture. So, again, it's just taking things out of context, reading into things that, you're taking things so literally to the point of not looking at the overall picture of everything. And in regard to the sacrifice of Jesus, his sacrifice was not a replacement of the Mosaic law, but his sacrifice was, let's say, an addition to. It does not abolish the law. It does not abolish the priesthood of Aaron or the Levites, but the priesthood of Jesus is a priesthood that is based on the power of an indestructible life. And we get into that basically, in the Psalms of David, And I believe it's Psalm 110. I don't have the reference here, but basically, it's Psalm chapter 2, I think, where he says, "You will not allow your Holy One to see decay." Basically a reference to resurrection. Not just of the Messiah, but at that time, the speaker of that psalm had faith that the Lord would resurrect him. But in the same way, the reference is to the Anointed One, the Holy One. You will not allow your Holy One to see decay. And so again, we see this process of the gradual fulfillment of prophetic manifestation. We see this prophecy culminating in resurrection that comes to be shown in the resurrection of Jesus. So regarding the second coming, where a lot of people say, well, there is no second coming. It doesn't say there's going to be a second coming, in the Jewish scriptures. And that again, this concept of second coming is actually sort of a repackaging of the gathering of Israel. Where Jesus is speaking his parables, and he says, two men will be working, or two men will be going up a hill, and one will be taken and the other left. And he gives this story about how one man's working, the other, one's taken, one's left. And what he's talking about is the gathering of Israel, and we see that in the Torah. That Moses, when he's talking to the Israelites, he says, "Hey, look, if you guys are scattered, it doesn't matter if you're scattered to the ends of the sky, how far you're scattered, the Lord is going to bring you back. Okay, He's going to gather you back, to Israel." And so this is the concept of the gathering, the gathering of Israel, and so. So that's what it is. It's you call it the second coming, you call it the gathering of Israel. So again, it's just a misunderstanding in case of semantics or something. But when we talk about prophecy, when we talk about Jesus coming as a humble, suffering Messiah. But yet, he's going to fulfill that kingly aspect of the Messiahship when the gathering of Israel takes place. So we see him fulfilling all aspects of this. And especially in regard to the whole genealogical argument, it's almost like we're just covering all of our bases here. We see, that God shows you the lineage from David to Solomon to Joseph, the father who adopted Jesus. We see that he weds Mary, who is the daughter of Heli, who is the son of Nathan, who is the son of David. And we see that Jesus is resurrected, and he has gained a priesthood on the power of an indestructible life, as stated in the book of Hebrews and in reference to the Psalms, that the Lord will not let His Holy One see decay. And that, Jesus' priesthood is compared with the Melchizedek priesthood, and so it has nothing to do with the Aaronic priesthood, the Levitical priesthood. It does not do away with the Mosaic law. It is in addition to, and it is complementary to all of that. So in regard to the pagan myths, we see there's a gentleman online. His name is Gentile023. He makes a good little reference here to in regard to like the Trinity, the claim that Nimrod, Cimaris, and Tammuz were a Trinity was something that was made up by a gentleman named Alexander Hyssop, who wrote a book called The Two Babylons in 1853, and he made up the whole Babylonian Trinity. You know, I just wanted to, that's a very interesting thing if you want to look that up. But I just wanted to note that the whole concepts of trinities in other, you know, Babylonian, Assyrian, Persian, you know, those trinities, if you want to even like say that they were stable because they were always changing of like different gods, or if they were even trinities to begin with, because the gods were distinct from one another and not one with each other. Okay, so that's one thing that I wanted to point out, and we don't see that concept of the Christian concept, which is actually a Jewish concept. Whether most Jews don't want to acknowledge the fact that the Lord is an incomprehensible plurality and unity. Let me just put it that way. That's the best way I could say it. So you know, I could get into this this stuff about, you know, Jacob wrestling with the angel of the Lord, but really what we want to focus on is that the angel of the Lord is the Lord. It's really that simple, folks. Now, is the angel of the Lord this incomprehensible Lord that we cannot fathom? No. The angel of the Lord is the Lord's, for want of a better word, mechanism to communicate with us. And, you know, the rabbis can get into all kinds of arguments about, did Moses talk with God as one talks with God, as, you know, from face to face? And the reality is that those scriptures are very clear. You know, it says that Moses talked with the Lord as one talked with a man face to face. It says that Jacob wrestled with the Lord. It says that Abraham was visited by the Lord. Oh, he was visited by the angel of the Lord. And what we need to understand is that the angel of the Lord was worshipped. The angel of the Lord was seen as the Lord. Okay? That's all he was the Lord. Okay? So, you know, there's definitely more to God than just somebody we cannot comprehend. You know, is the Lord, let me just ask you this, is the Lord so unfathomable, not able to be fathomed? Is he so complicated that we could never understand him? And I mean, if God is love, isn't he going to figure out a way to communicate with us if he loves us? And isn't he going to be able to manifest himself in whatever form that he wants to? You know, just as he was in the fire when he spoke to Moses, you know, and so why is it not possible that the Lord is also the Messiah? So I get into this in some of my other videos about how the Lord's very nature is that of a Messiah. That it is the Lord himself who is ultimately the Messiah. The Lord is the Messiah. Okay? It's all these other men, these Messiahs that are a foreshadow of the real Messiah. Okay? And for that matter, man himself is nothing but an image of the Lord. When the Lord created male and female, he created them in the likeness of himself. Okay? All of reality is nothing but a reflection of the Lord. Okay? How can I put this? The Messiah is the Lord. Okay? That's the simplest way I can put it. All right. So regarding the pagan myths, there's also a great article that can't remember his name right now. It's on tectonics.org. It's called No Way Jose. Gentile023 brings up this argument too about the genetic fallacy regarding the pagan myth. The pagan myth parallels, virgin birth, called pagan at times. Actually, Pagan, the Christian, brings up this point too, and that is, there is no instance of a virgin birth as defined by Christianity appearing in any form before the rise of Christianity. Okay? So go back and do your homework, look into it, and know Zoroaster was not born of a virgin, and neither will the future Saint-Seance, or I can't remember how to pronounce it. If you read the Bundehissen, Zoroastrian scriptures, you'll see that Zoroaster, the future saviors, so to speak, that virgins bathing in a pond where Zoroaster's seed had been preserved impregnate these women. So again, what you see there are virgins being impregnated by the seed of Zoroaster. Not a virgin birth concept in regard to like Christianity, not at all. And that's even those are even legends after Christianity. So basically, if you see the two comings of the Messiah, you can explain how all these prophecies, of suffering servant, kingly Messiah, you can see how they all make more sense if you see Messiah coming first as a suffering servant and then second as a kingly Messiah. With that, I will stop right there. And God bless you all. Keep seeking truth.